on Zoom, and we're also available through Facebook and YouTube comments. So please leave your comments in the Facebook and YouTube videos that are streaming now, and we will get to you in this video as soon as we have the questions period. And likewise with everyone here on Zoom, please hold on to your questions until we have the time available for questions, and we will go through them ASAP. And I'm already seeing here in the messages, please send the links to Facebook and YouTube. Yes, we'll be doing this first priority on the Facebook page, and we'll be sending it here as well, as soon as we can copy paste. And Jeremiah here is also on that with me. So more than anything, welcome everyone who's joining us. It is 10:56. We're 4 minutes until our 11 o'clock presentation. I do want to give everyone an introduction, a brief introduction to Mr. Hakim, who's joining us today to talk on a very important subject. And that subject today is a logical proof of the existence of God. And now this subject, if you on clearwaterbaha'is.org want to have more information on it, okay, we could please mute when you're joining, background sound. Let's see here. Okay, I think we're good. So if you go on to www.clearwaterbaha'is.org, you can find the meeting topic right now regarding logical proof of the existence of God. And you can also find it in our previous online classes section. And you'll see the blog for this. You can share that and the materials that come along with it, which includes the PowerPoint PDF by Dr. William Hatcher, a book by Dr. William Hatcher called Minimalism, which you can also find there, the link to it, and to the website of William Hatcher. It is william.hatcher.org. And this website, if you go there, you'll find a lot of the materials that Dr. William Hatcher, who is the inspiration for this talk and the substance of it, you'll see the materials that Mr. Hakim refers to in Dr. Hatcher's works. Now, as it relates to Mr. Hakim is a philanthropist who's dedicated to the promotion of an ever-advancing civilization. From his work with educational institutions and health clinics to date, Mr. Hakim has shown his commitment to service to the entire human race. Mr. Hakim abides by the principle that humanity shares one identity, one common creator, and one common destiny. He has graduated from Stony Brook University in Stony Brook, New York, with a Bachelor of Science in Physics and a Master of Science in Computer Sciences and Applied Mathematics. So you can see his mathematical background is going to be very important today. With that being said, the topic, a logical proof of the existence of God. Below is a brief synopsis of Mr. Hakim's talk today. Abdu'l-Baha has expressed this conception of the nature of knowledge in the following terms. Reflect that man's power of thought consists of two kinds. One kind is true when it agrees with a determined reality. Such conceptions find realization in the exterior world. Such are accurate opinions, correct theories, scientific discoveries, and inventions. The other kind of conceptions is made up of vain thoughts and useless ideas which yield neither fruit nor result, and which have no reality. No, they surge like the waves of the sea of imaginations, and they pass away like the idle dreams. Let us sum up briefly. A human idea is a subjective mental entity by its very nature. Some ideas are vain in that they do not correspond to any reality outside of themselves. Other ideas are true in that they reflect or mirror some configuration in reality via an appropriate correspondence between themselves. With that being said, Mr. Hakim, it is time for you to be speaking. Thank you for, again, joining us. And for all of you who are, again, joining now on Zoom, please keep yourselves on mute and message through the chat your questions. And when the time for questions come, we want to get to these questions. So please message in the chat in Zoom or on your Facebook comments or on your YouTube comments. As we go along, we will get to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for spending time with us this Sunday morning. We are gonna journey through history of science and philosophy to show the elements and people that influence that process for past 1,000 years. So it's really critical to know and use the same tools and logic that was used by predecessor in the scientific area to prove hypothesis that currently is commonly used. So we're not deviating with any method, scientific method that our predecessors have not used. So we're basically trying to objectively prove the existence of the creator in general. So that's really the goal overall for today. So here we start with philosophy. People think philosophy is something which has no material impact, which is basically is a branch of science. So it's not something that it's in conjecture of human mind. It's basically a process of scientifically examining metaphysics, which is beyond material. That's all it is. It's a tool, like any other tool that we use in science. So what is philosophy intends to answer? Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going to? What is knowledge? What is truth? What are good and evil? What is the meaning of life? So these are classical questions that philosophy tries to answer. And philosophy has many, many different branches in general. But for today, we're gonna match the history of science and chronology of celestial and atomic observations. So basically in late 1500s, people started to look at the sky and they tried to solve problems that they were seeing in general. So we went from Galileo with telescope. By the way, many centuries before that, Muslims invented the telescope itself, and it was in use in I think 12th or 1300s. Then we went to Descartes and Newton, which precisely defined how celestial bodies interact with each other. And then, of course, Einstein, which promoted the theory of relativity and new definition for gravity, for example. And then we started to mimic how the universe works in a laboratory, and we created accelerators. These are basically large circles that they accelerate particles and smash it together to see what happens. CERN is the largest in Switzerland. And of course, later on, quantum mechanics allowed us to develop most of the modern devices that we use was invented by Heisenberg. Actually, the theory of it came from Heisenberg, and most of these devices that we're using today is because of quantum mechanics. And of course, we went to atomic microscopes and so on. So this issue of gravity, attraction, and love is the cause of this inquisitiveness of humanity trying to find true solution to questions that is posed. So here, we're gonna define metaphysics And it was coined as by the ancient Greek. Meta means beyond, basically, or after. Physics means physical. So it's a very benign term in terms of if we can't see something or physically touch it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And Webster Dictionary is basically metaphysics is a branch of philosophy concerned with the origin and structure of the universe. And this branch investigates principles of reality, transcendent those of a particular science. Traditional include cosmology, ontology, and speculative philosophy. Ontology is the branch of metaphysics dealing with the philosophical theory of reality, including consideration of the universal and necessary characteristics of all existence, and particularly theory of reality. Cosmology is the general philosophy of the universe considered as a totality of parts and phenomena subject to laws. So this is generally what metaphysics is. Now, when you go back, we see basically Renaissance was the beginning of the revolution in discoveries and progress in science. Renaissance means rebirth, and majority believe that the modern science and medicine start of it was basically this transitional movement in Europe between medieval and modern times, beginning in 14th century Italy, lasting through 17th century. This is humanistic revival of classical influence expressed in a flowering of the arts and literature and beginning of modern science. So Shoei Effendi, guardian of Baha'i faith, describes while basically Europe was in dark ages, this Renaissance revolutionized Europe in general. And this is what he says: you should also cautiously emphasize the truth that due to the historical order of its appearance, and also because of the obviously more advanced character of its teaching, Islam constitutes a fuller revelation of God's purpose for mankind. The so-called Christian civilization, of which the Renaissance is one of the most striking manifestations, is essentially Muslim in its origin and foundations. When medieval Europe was plunged in darkness of barbarism, the Arabs regenerated and transformed by the spirit released by the religion of Muhammad, were busily engaged in establishing a civilization the like of which the contemporary Christian in Europe had never witnessed before. It was eventually through Arabs that civilization was introduced to the West. It was through them that the philosophy, science, and culture which the old Greeks had developed found their way to Europe. The Arabs were the ablest translators and linguists of their age. And it is thanks to them that the writings of such well-known thinkers as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were made available to the Westerners. It is wholly unfair to attribute the efflorescence of the European culture during the Renaissance period to the influence of Christianity. It was mainly the product of the forces released by the Muhammadan dispensation. So as we see, the religion was the cause, the Islamic cause of this jump-starting this revolution that occurred. Now we go to the people that really influenced sciences and new thinking throughout the history of man. Obviously, Luther was one of them. he became increasingly angry about the clergy selling indulgences, promised remission from punishment for sin. The Reformation began in October 31st, 1517, when German monk Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the castle church door in Wittenberg, Germany. This was one of the greatest events of the past 1,000 years. Martin Luther made a translation of Bible from Greek and Hebrew into German. Soon all the countries of Europe followed his example by translating the scriptures into their languages. For the first time in history, the recently invented printing press made Word of God available to all people. The next person that has had excuse me, fundamental impact was René Descartes, which was a mathematician and philosopher. And the concept was revolutionized the way humanity was thinking about events that were surrounding them throughout their lives. So his concept was very interesting. It says any material phenomenon has a material source. So there was no longer God making earthquakes or bringing famine or bringing plagues. And his assumption was quite interesting. He said, I think, therefore I am. So this is really very important step in terms of releasing the methodology of thinking in humanity. There can be no serious doubt that the modern period, both in philosophy and science, begins with René Descartes. Modern science is squarely based on Descartes' fusion of the Greek geometry and Arabic algebra into a single unified discipline, algebraic geometry. The Descartes' approach was bottom-up instead of top-down. And we're going to use the same techniques, by the way, in this talk. It began with undisputed facts of the human condition. We are conscious, self-aware beings with no intrinsic measure of absolute truth, and moved upward toward the absolute, whose existence we can deduce from the nature of our innate ideas. Following Galileo's dictum, nature is writ in the language of mathematics, Descartes conceived of a breathtaking program to build a complete description of whole reality in exact mathematical language. Then came in Isaac Newton, and his laws of motion, which basically completely define how celestial bodies interact and the orbits and gravitational forces and so on and so forth. So Newton invented a scientific method which was truly universal in its scope. And these rules are quite intriguing. And obviously he published in his books all these principles. First one says that we are to admit no more causes of natural things such as are both true and sufficient to explain their appearance. The same natural effects must be assigned to the same causes. Third, qualities of bodies are to be esteemed as universal. Fourth, propositions deduced from observation of phenomena should be viewed as accurate until other phenomena contradicts them. And he was the inventor of calculus. Next one came in around 1800s, Sadi Carnot, which was a French scientist and called father of thermodynamics. And we're going to use some of his laws in our discussion. First thing, it says that the total energy of an isolated system is constant. Energy can be transformed from one form to the other, but can be neither created nor destroyed. Second, moving toward disorder is the natural state of universe. The increase in entropy accounts for the irreversibility of natural process. That means anything that breaks down, the energy that dissipates turns into heat and basically becomes unuseful energy. So the whole world is going toward disorder. That means entropy is increasing all the time. Heat of the universe is increasing all the time. The third one says that if you freeze basically to absolute zero, this entropy stops basically increasing. So this is very important aspects. Now we're going to the theory of relativity, Albert Einstein, which basically expanded the Newtonian law regarding gravity and space and time. Ironically, if you plug in the short distances into Einstein's formulas, his laws, you end up with Newtonian laws. So science is cumulative, it's not contradicting prior discoveries. It's just expanding the scope of the jurisdiction that those laws operate. So on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, his famous formula, E equals mc squared, which energy is equivalent to mass times speed of light, which is a very large number. Now, as we know, nothing appears or disappears in universe. It only changes form. From this theory, quantum mechanics was born. That was at odds with his philosophy that the universe can be defined precisely by a mathematical equation, which still people are looking for it, called unified force theory. He spent decades on his work without any outcome, and finally he passed away in 1955. Now we're looking at the defined scientific view of reality. What is reality? Obviously, there are two separate views of reality, and we're gonna describe that. The first one is all object reality can be quantified. And with a mathematical model, it can be described fully and accurately. Its behavior in the past, present, and the future can be accurately predicted, described, and quantified. So we can tell when, for example, the sun would exhaust its internal energy and disappear in the future. So, for example, behavior of solar systems, speed, gravity, distance, rotation, energy, temperature, and all other physical reality of our solar system can be calculated from billions of years ago to billions of years in the future with accuracy, with handful of formulas. From Descartes to Newton and Einstein followed this philosophy. So from 17th century to 1930s, this was a common belief, which is very close to materialism in general. Now, when Heisenberg invented the quantum mechanics, all this new definition came about, which is objectively proven. All objective reality cannot be quantified, and no complete mathematical formula exists to describe a complex system. And this is where quantum mechanics was born. For example, we know black hole, dark matter, and dark energy exist, but we can't verify it. We can't see it. So Heisenberg, Gödel, from 1931 to present, the whole picture of how universe was formed was completely changed. Now, who's Heisenberg? He was one of the greatest, excuse me, greatest physicists of 12th century. He's best known as a founder of quantum mechanics, the new physics of the atomic world, and especially for the uncertainty principle in quantum theory. Simply put, the principle states that there is a fundamental limit to what one can know about a quantum system. For example, the more precisely one knows a particle's position, the less one knows about its momentum, and vice versa. The limit is expressed as a simple equation that is straightforward to prove mathematically. A good example of it is the electron. Obviously, electron is, has an orbit around the nuclei, and the way that we can tell where it is we have to hit it with a photon, which is it's a tiny, tiny particle. But because of the energy of photon disrupt the orbit of electron, we can't tell after we know where it was, where it's going to. So you cannot measure where this electron is just now. So these are really critical aspects of his theory. Now, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle completely flies in the face of classical physics, which is basically statistics. It says that the possibility of an event that happen, you can predict. For example, you may walk out of your home, excuse me, and end up in Paris. The chances are infinitesimal, but it still does exist. So that's really uncertainty principle. So quantum mechanics is saying that it's impossible to get those measurements exact, but the Heisenberg uncertainty principle is a fact of nature, and it would be impossible to build a measuring device which could get around it. Now, what is this quantum mechanic used today? Everything that you touch today, quantum chemistry, quantum optics, quantum computing, superconducting magnets, light-emitting diodes, the optical amplifier, and the laser, the transistor, semiconductors such as microprocessor, medical and research imaging systems like PET scan. You see, this has dissipated in the entire, every device that we use today came from this quantum mechanics. Now, Gödel. Obviously, as strong as Heisenberg's uncertainty principle may be, it does not in itself constitute a definitive refutation of Descartes' program. However, this possibility was destroyed by the phenomenon of Gödel, incompleteness. Gödel showed by an ingenious but straightforward argument that any objectively specifiable mathematical system which is rich enough to contain the basic axioms, laws, and lexicon of arithmetic is incomplete. It means that the system will contain true propositions that cannot be proved, nor their negation disproved. In other words, they cannot exist any complete and exact description of reality. Now, we go to today's subject, and Sir Roger Penrose, which got the Nobel Prize of Physics in 2020, the icing on Gödel's cake was provided more recently by Roger Penrose, who applied Gödel's result to show that the human brain cannot be deterministic. It cannot be a device. And what does this say? It says that actually we are a subjective machine a subjective entity. So anything that we encounter has an image into our being. It cannot be objective. So when you say, today is, I am hot or I am cold, that means that you're feeling hot and feeling cold. A good example would be if we take 2 jars of ice cold water and very hot water, we put 2 fingers into these jars. One feels cold, one feels hot. Then we pull these fingers out, put it into a lukewarm water. Guess what? Same lukewarm water, one finger tells us is a cold water, the other finger tells us is a hot water. Although it's the same brain that is making this decision. So you see how subjective our brain is. So he was collaborating with Hawkins on singularity, origin of the universe, and Big Bang for a long time. We know now certainly that any substantial theory of reality represents a compromise, trade-off between exactness and adequacy. Now we go to, so we know from this process that no machine or experiment can be built to verify the existence of the reality. So this Cartesian Leibnizian principle that causes of material phenomena are necessarily material is false. Gödel principle refutes reductionism stance that everything can be objectified. Scientists are still trying to prove unified string theory that quark, the common particle of atom, is made of tiny wiglets, weightless vibrating strings, particles in 6 or 11 dimensions that make up and explains all forces in the universe. Now in Baha'i doctrine, say only 3-dimensional time is visible, but Baha'u'llah has revealed about invisible spiritual dimensions surrounding us and is closer than we think. So rise of materialism. So generally, as we see, majority of humanity still subscribes to the Cartesian theory in general, and masses adopted that because it's very convenient and simple to comprehend. And they think this spiritual reality is just a nuance which may or may not have any impact anyways. So the metaphysics and the whole concept of spiritual, or spiritual means transmaterial. It doesn't mean we invented something that doesn't exist. It's just transmaterial. Reality could be dispensed with. However, more modern developments, the hardest of sciences, logic, mathematics, and physics, have shown unequivocally that materialism is not self-contained, and that is both philosophically and scientifically inadequate. So the first such development was the undecidability principle of Heisenberg, that joint or simultaneous measurement of certain physical parameters are logically impossible. Heisenberg principle turned out to be a provable mathematical theorem with the Hilbert space mathematical formulation of quantum mechanics. In this strong form, the Heisenberg principle can be stated as follows. No complete and exact description of physical reality is logically possible within the framework and based on the axiom of Hilbert space model of quantum mechanics. Great, so what are these things that we cannot see? We know it exists, We can't prove the essence of those elements. So we have dark hole, dark matter, which is gravity, dark energy, which is repulsive energy, exists through mathematical model, but not verifiable. As a matter of fact, 95% of the universe is not visible. So dark matter produces an attractive force, which is gravity. Dark energy produces a repulsive force, anti-gravity. Together, they make up 95% of the universe, and we can't see either. Astronomers know dark matter exists because visible matter doesn't have enough gravitational muster to hold galaxies together. And this is the proof of it. So now we're going to knowledge and reality, subjective and subjectivity and objectivity. So objective knowledge of reality, by objective knowledge, we mean the knowledge that is invariant under change of point of view. The question itself already involves several assumptions. There exists a mind-independent objective reality whose intrinsic feature or qualities are independent of the mental state of knower. That means that actually the reality objectively exists. Whether we know about it or not is not relevant. So it does exist objectively. The second is that the principle possible to apprehend those objective qualities, if not wholly or perfectly, at least to a significant degree. This brain of subjective mind that we have has ability to comprehend it. First, the reality has to exist. Second, our brain has to be able to comprehend it, these objective qualities. The third is it is possible to formulate, to articulate this understanding in a manner that allows us to communicate with each other. So we need to create a methodology when we comprehend a reality, although we can't verify it, we can communicate it to each other. So there is an inner model that we have to create, relates to reality, like a map relates to a territory. Ontologically, a map of Canada has nothing in common with Canada. Canada is geographic territory made of earth, water, forest, while the map of Canada is a piece of paper with some colors and pictures that is impressed on it. What makes this mass of color fiber into map of Canada is the existence of an appropriate correspondence between certain points on the map and certain real location in Canada. Similarly, what makes our inner model, the model of reality, is the existence of correspondence between certain features of the subjective model on one hand, which is map of Canada, and certain features of objective reality on the other hand. Whether a given idea is true or only a vain idea depends on whether an appropriate relationship exists between the idea and some portion of reality. So we know Canada exists. We created a model to reflect that reality, created a map, and then when we show this to each other, we can communicate this reality to others via this map. So anyone that you show this to that has seen Canada, knows about Canada, can correlate to the idea. So there is a subjective model, basically, that we created. First of all, Canada exists. Subjective model is the map. And now we have ability to show it to other people and communicate the reality. So here we're gonna go to now all approach to building description of systems out of the description of subsystems. So this model explains that we can, if we break down any phenomenon into its components and we define its subsystems, eventually we can define the whole. So this philosophy describes a number of related contentious theories that hold very roughly that the nature of complex things can be always reduced by simpler or more fundamental things. So that's one method. Postmodernism is a counter ideology of reductionism and is usually articulated in opposition to reductionism, but without any consideration of the pragmatic stance of minimalism. So postmodernists have all heard of Gödel's theorem, though most of them, they don't understand what it is. So these two positions of philosophy, we can define it as this. That there are these two extreme positions. The first is objectivist or positivist reductionism, which holds that there is nothing beyond that which can be objectified. This position holds that all knowledge, or at least all significant knowledge, can be obtained from the process of objectification. This view of philosophy is typically of skeptics, positivists, and scientific materialists generally. The second extreme position is that only the trivial can be objectified. The characteristic of significant knowledge is precisely its essential subjectivity, that it resists objectification. So postmodernism, deconstructionism, existentialism, and some form of mysticism take basically this position. Now we're going to Dr. William Hatcher, which is a philosophist, a mathematician, philosopher, and educator. He held a doctorate in mathematics, a specialist in the philosophical interpretation of science and religion. He had for over 40 years held university position in North America, Europe, and Russia. Professor Hatcher is one of the 8 Platonist philosophers listed for the second half of the 20th century. Okay, so tools that we're gonna use today to get our question answered, whether creator exists or not. So we use methodology. The same methodology means method of scientific method. The same way that Einstein, Descartes, and Newton used, we're gonna use the same methodology. Axiom means laws, basically, that is valid under any condition. And theorem is the questions that we wanna answer. Does creator exist? So this process is bottom up, going from particular to general. From Descartes to Newton to Einstein to Heisenberg and Gödel, all have followed the same process and cumulatively and incrementally expanded the knowledge of the objective reality. So this minimalism is the invention of Professor Hatcher that expands that objective reality for us. So here, we are saying that the portion of the first, any portion of reality that is objectifiable, we should objectify. That means there is no limitation for science and discovery. Objectification is possible. This is the fundamental premises of minimalism. Second, the whole human knowledge cannot be objectified, which Heisenberg proved that. Total objectification is impossible. The third, everything which can be objectified should be objectified. The fourth, the boundary between objectifiable and non-objectifiable cannot itself be objectified. We prove objectification only by accomplishing objectification. What does it mean is that the domain of science is increasing. So this barrier between objectification and non-objectifiable is moving all the time. And there's nothing wrong with it. Valid human knowledge which resists objectification is not irrational, but transrational. So if we do not, if we cannot prove that dark energy or basically dark matter exists, doesn't mean it's irrational, it's transrational. And the objectification is a means to obtain clarity, it's nothing special. Generally. So what is the definitions that we're gonna use on minimalism? The first, obviously most basic assumption is there is something and not nothing. This assumption even logically prior even to solipsism, which suppose that there is only subjective existence. That means the reality is in our head, subjective brain, and nowhere else. So that's even they admit that basically self exists. Now, second one definition is whole reality. Now we define reality as the totality of actual existence, past, present, and future. Reality is everything there is, where the verb to be is used in an atemporal, timeless, or eternal sense. This is a minimalist definition of reality because it puts the least possible presupposition on the nature of reality. For example, it allows for existence of trans-temporal entities. Entities exist outside of time and space without actively supposing that such entities do in fact exist. Thus, time is regarded as independent dimension and time-bound entities are time parameters. So this is the whole reality. Anything that you can think of, we assume is this whole reality. Now, we talk about phenomenon. We define phenomenon as some non-empty portion of reality. Thus, every existence is a phenomenon. And reality itself is just one big phenomenon. Reality and existence are thus interdefinable. Reality is the sum of all existence and phenomenon in some non-empty part of reality. So we define that also. Now we're gonna define a couple of basically proposition elements and componenthood, relations. So first, we assume that any existing phenomenon must be either simple or composite. And the picture would show you B is simple, that means it's one monolithic entity. And you see B, phenomenon, that is composite, includes some simple entity in it and some complex entity in it. And we call this phenomenon B on the left side composite. So these are the two parameters that we're gonna use. And now we define phenomenon. Next, we define phenomenon as some non-empty portion of reality. Thus, every existing phenomenon and reality itself is just one big phenomenon. Reality and existence are thus interchangeable. Reality is the sum of existence and a phenomenon is some non-empty part of reality. So anything you can think of and you can measure is in this reality. Whether it exists or not, we're not interested. So the two two parameters we're going to show here is component and relationship. We say, as you see in here, that A is contained in B, which you can see. That means in every component, that simple component that belongs to A or composite component that belongs to A also are component of B. So we define componenthood and relationship. So either a simple component is in B, or a complex or composite is in B. But everything that is in A is in B also. Very simple. Now, we're gonna expand a little bit human body as a biological system. The immediate component of the body are its biological systems. And the immediate component of these biological systems are the organs that comprise. Thus, the digestive system is both a component of the body and also a subsystem of the body. The immediate component of the digestive system are organs such as stomach, small intestine. The ultimate organic component of the body as an organism are its cells. The ultimate component of the body viewed as a physical object are the elementary particles, electron, neutron, proton, which are components of the atom that occur in the various cells of the body. So this gives you an indication of very simple definitions generally. So all of the components, except possibly some of the ultimate components, are also systems, but an ultimate component cannot be a subsystem. That means that you cannot break it further down. Now we start to defining our laws that are universal to prove the existence of creator. We're going to use basically 4 laws, and these laws should be universal and acceptable under any circumstances. So let us use the symbol of whole reality to stand for the whole of reality. Since by definition, every composite phenomenon is a portion of reality, every such composite phenomena is contained in whole reality. So that means that whole reality has every component that ever existed and will exist. So that's the law. And it's very simple because, as you see, we're composite, and many of us right now in different locations are talking to each other. Therefore, and we're part of reality. So whole reality is composite. Very simple. So how do we mathematically use this symbol to show it? It's very simple. You say composite phenomenon is either contained in whole reality or is a component of the whole reality. And this is how you write it. At the last line, you say component can be an element of composite phenomenon, and composite phenomena can be contained in whole reality. Now we're gonna define another useful symbol called causality or creation. Now, just to simplify, give an example, we can say why grass is green. Good question. We know, scientifically proven, white light, all spectrum shines on grass. Grass has pigmentation that absorbs all spectrum of light except green that is reflected. Therefore, the observer sees grass to be green. So this is objectively we prove why grass is clean. Now, if we use different, basically subjective philosophies and minds that humans have, we can define this as different methods. So Pigmentation of grass caused grass to be green. Positivism, that we know it's true. Nature caused grass to be green. Observer caused grass to be green, or God basically created grass to be green or made grass to be green, which is mysticism. So, but now, for the time being, we're gonna move toward the objectively, scientifically put that positivist hat on to go further. So now we're gonna talk about causality and cause and effect. Now we consider a second relationship between two phenomena, which is called causality or creation relation. And that arrow is the symbol that we're gonna use. So let's creator and created be two phenomena, composite or not. We say that creator causes, creates, created, and we write creator caused, created. If it is the case that created exists by virtue of creator, this very simple proposition here. And remember the definition on the top that we define creator as an entity that created itself. So creator is self-caused phenomena. This is our definition of creator. So if for some creator and created caused, creator caused created holds, then creator is a cause, and then created is an effect or result of the creation of the creator. Now we go to the second, we're gonna go to the second law, and that is, so everything, principle of sufficient reason states that no phenomena can exist without a cause. So no creation without a creator. The laws of thermodynamics indicate nothing is created or destroyed in the universe. It is just changes forms. So P1 says that we are either created or creator and never both. So how do we present this? So we say created is caused or other caused. Creator is uncaused or self-caused, never both. And the reason it's never both is very simple. If you are based on sufficient reason, if you can create yourself, there is no need for somebody else to create you. So the definition of creator cannot be both creator and created by somebody else. When we talk about an inventor creates a phenomenon by assembling created material to perform new functions, he's an assembler, not a self-caused creator. So we have to differentiate between subjective meaning of creator in our understanding and the creator that we're defining here. Okay, very well. So here, how do we write this? So if there is a creator not equal to created such that creator caused created, then we say created is caused or created. If created creates created, then we say that created is self-caused, and we define that as creator. So this is what the meaning of creator is. So P1 insinuate that either we are created or creator, and we can't be both at the same time. Very simple process. The P2, or the third law, it says that if you created something, you created all its components. And it's a very simple, also agreeable So how do we write this? We say if created one holds, that means created one exists by virtue of creator one, then every component, the creator one phenomenon, is capable of by itself producing all of the created one, all its components. Very, very simple process. So if we created B, that means we created every element in B also, which includes A1, A3, A4, and so on. The last, so this symbol, how do we show this is we say creator caused created one, creator one is a composite or simple. So if component one is part of the created one, is one of the A3, A4s, part of the A, and therefore the component one is included in created one. So that means that all components of the created one was created by the creator. Very simple, symbolic. The last one, the last law that we're going to use, that a composite cannot create part of itself. So a creator that we define, which is self-caused, cannot create part of itself. And why is it? And this holds under any condition. Assert that composite can never be cause, creator of one of its own component. Indeed, as we have already seen above in our discussion of substance and form, the existence of composite whole depends both on its components and the various relationship between these components. If one of these components is not there, obviously the phenomenon doesn't exist to perform the creation. So you cannot create part of yourself. Very clear. So how do we write this? We say if creator created a component, that component cannot be part of itself because it wouldn't be complete without it to be able to create the component itself. So it's a very simple process that creator cannot create part of itself. And this is the fourth law. And now a few examples generally is, so we can say human, if he was his own creator, cannot generate his own heart. Heart is a component of subsystem. Without it, humans would not exist. So this is really clear from that, a good example in general. Now you might say, well, there may be some condition that this assumption we made is not correct, or this law. An example of it would be that the body generates new cells and cells die continuously. In reality, the body that generated the new cell created a new you. It's not the old you, because now you time parameters events. So this is really critical to know that you didn't create yourself, your body created a new you. So it's a completely different proposition in general. So how do we reconcile this? From a subsystem perspective, a human body as a composite system follows second law of thermodynamics. This composite system, after using its internal energy, repairing itself, dies and turns into dust to its primary components. Therefore, it cannot be self-caused, immortal. Therefore, based on commonly believed theory, quarks and electrons cause particles. Particles cause periodic table. Periodic table caused RNA and evolution, caused DNA and evolution cause cell, and evolution caused human. So therefore, human didn't cause human. So evolution is an assembler phenomenon, not a creator, based on what we define the creator to be. Now, in certain cases, you may say this doesn't exclude environments where, for example, we can say that solar system created the bodies that are included, celestial bodies or planets that are included in solar system. In reality, the theory is that all those planets were part of the sun and then spun off from the sun. So it's very simple. It doesn't have any conflict with the P3 that we define. So what are we trying to prove now? We're going to now those minutes to prove that creator exists. First of all, the methodology we're going to use is going to be exactly same as our predecessor scientists. We use these 4 laws. Whole reality is composite. Every existing phenomenon, if it exists in whole reality, is either created or creator, and never both. P2, if you created something as a whole, you have created all its components. The 4th one, you cannot create part of yourself. Beside P1, which we know is composite, reality is composite, is absolutely certain. None of the other principles make any existent assertion, whatever. That means that all universal conditional statement, proposition which affirms that whenever and if ever certain conditions are obtained, then certain other condition must be fulfilled. So this is the tools that we're going to use to prove it. Now, what is the question that we want to prove? The theorem is creator. Does creator exist? And it's a binary situation. Either it does or it doesn't. Now, what are the characteristics of this creator that we want to prove exists by using those axioms or laws that we defined? A, there is a creator in whole reality, which is self-caused phenomenon. 2, or B, the creator is simple. C, the creator is unique, universal creator, cause of every existent phenomenon. D, there is only one creator for whole reality. This is what we're trying to prove. So proof of A, we begin by asking question, what is the cause of the global phenomenal whole reality? And we give it that symbol, brown symbol of whole reality. Who created whole reality? By P1, we know whole reality is either creator or created. Now let's assume that whole reality created whole reality, right? So this is how we symbolize it. Whole reality caused whole reality. By P0, we know that it's composite. By P2, there is some component like star, man, and dinosaur, like planet, human, and dinosaur, that makes the whole reality. That means whole reality basically produced or created planets, man, and dinosaurs. But P2, now by using P2, this contradicts limitation of P3, because since planets, man, and dinosaurs are a component of whole reality, we said by P3 that composite cannot create part of itself. So therefore, whole reality did not create whole reality, because those components weren't there to create itself. So we know now that that proposition of whole reality created whole reality doesn't exist. So therefore, whole reality must be a creator, must have a creator. That means whole reality is other cause. This proves as well non-composite can be creator, self-caused. So applying P1 to whole reality must be a creation. So we know that now. So creator, which is not whole reality, but is part of whole reality, created the whole reality. Now, every phenomenon is either a component or subsystem of whole reality, based on definition. We thus have creator created whole reality, and the creator is a part of whole reality. What does this say to us? Based on P2, that means creator created the creator also. So this P2 tells us, because if you created the whole reality, that includes creator, you have created all of its components, including creator. So A is proven, that creator exists and creator is self-caused. So they proved A. Now proving B, creator is simple. Creator is simple because if creator has some component, part creator, we could then conclude based on P2 that creator created part creator, because part creator is part of reality. But based on P3, you cannot create part of yourself. Therefore, creator is simple, is not complex or composite. So B is proven, creator is simple. Let's prove C, universal cause. The simplicity of the creator implies that creator is an entity and thus component of whole reality. So creator is entity and a component of whole reality. Moreover, creator created the whole reality, and every phenomenon in existence is part of whole reality. Hence, based on P2, if you created some, you created all of it. So any phenomenon which is basically part of whole reality was created by the creator. So the creator, therefore, is universal cause of every existent phenomenon. And we proved C. Now, last but not least, finally, creator is the unique uncaused self-caused entity. We want to say that there is only one creator. Let's assume that there was another entity similar to creator that created itself, like creatoress, that caused itself. For some phenomenon, creatoress. Now we have already established that creator is the universal cause. So a creator has caused creatoress, but based on P1 that assert creator is both self-caused and created by creator, that this defies the second law that we defined, that you cannot be creator and created at the same time. You can't be both. So what does this say? That creatoress is the creator. Hence, the simply entity creator is the only uncaused self-caused phenomenon. So existence in existence. So D is proven. So what did we prove by using those laws? There is a creator for whole reality. The creator is simple. The creator is unique, universal creator, cause of every existent phenomenon. There is only one creator for the whole reality. Now, what is the conclusion? We want to see the comparison of the creator to the God of revelation. To what extent are we justified in identifying our creator with God? The answer, as we shall see, is that the justification is very great. Indeed, all traditions, whether philosophical, religious, scientific, or considered that God, if he exists, is first and foremost the creator of the ultimate cause of all existence. We have proved that our creator, in fact, the only one and only universal cause. This implies, in particular, that every concrete, observable phenomenon is the final step in a possibly infinite causal chain that begins with creator or God. So who is the God of revelation? Every major religion believes in monotheism, has identified the God as the ultimate origin of all existence. The Hebrew Bible begins with affirmation that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and continues by recounting how God made every living creature that moveth. The ultimate cause of all existence. He is and remains the God of creation, but we have proved that there can only be one such ultimate cause of all existence. Hence, the God of Israel, if he exists, is our creator. If we return to Christianity, the Gospel of John presents Jesus Christ as incarnation of Logos, the Word made flesh, and the Logos as the divine agency to which all things were made. Therefore, Logos is our creator. The Quran, the holy book of Islam, likewise identifies Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, singleness of God as the creator of all existence. Finally, the Baha'i writings quite explicitly identify the God of revelation and prophecy with the God of creation. Existence is of two kinds. One is the existence of God, which is beyond the comprehension of man. He, the invisible, the lofty, and the incomprehensible, is preceded by no cause, but rather is the originator of the cause of causes. He, the ancient, had no beginning and is the all-independent. The second kind of existence is the human existence. Not ancient, is dependent and had cause to it. We conclude the God of all religion is the same as the creator. So the Baha'i teachings explain, according to the Baha'i teaching, God has ordained two sources of valid knowledge for reality, science and revelation. The object of the knowledge is the same in both cases, but the methods are different. Science operates by systematizing the otherwise spontaneous experience of concrete reality and by inductive generalization coupled with creative conceptualization, moving upward towards abstract. General principles, which are then tested through further experiments by the systematic application of certain verification procedures. Thus, the strength of science or clarity, precision, and applicability is limitation derived primarily from partialness, specialization and fragmentation, relative incompleteness, and general lack of global vision. Now, what is revelation is based on the divine authority of the prophet or manifestation of God and is the perfect complement to science. In contrast to the language of science, the language of revelation is non-linear, extensive use of metaphor and multiple meanings, and maximalist, as rich as possible, freely referring to non-observable. Moreover, Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i religion, repeatedly affirms that his revelation is complete, though non-linear and inexhaustible description of reality. In contrast to the language of science, the language of revelation tends to be top-down, beginning with certain very general and universal principles, and then moving by specification and individuation towards the application of these principles to concrete human experience. Now we see the clash of minimalism and materialist, and obviously Stephen Hawking that everybody mentioned, well-known brief history of time, proponent of the so-called Big Bang, cosmological theory. Retro-extrapolating from the fact that the observable space-time universe is expanding, Hawking and others have concluded that space-time sprang into being from a point, the so-called isolated singularity, some 13.8 billion years ago. Hawking is a materialist who believed that space-time is all of reality. Now, what is whole reality space-time? He therefore assumes that all causality reduces to temporal causality. If further we assume at a Big Bang that time itself had discrete beginning, say 13.8 billion years ago, then there cannot be any cause to this event because there is no temporal before in which the cause could have existed when time didn't exist. So, but Hakim admits, which is very interesting, Hakim's argument for rejection of the principle of sufficient reason is thus non-compelled by logic, but represent rather his personal preference in believing that the same physical laws must somehow still hold even at singular point, sprang up from nothing. In his discussion, Hawkins even acknowledges that the God hypothesis may in fact be more reasonable than his preferred materialistic alternative, which negates the principle of sufficient reason. Now we're going to basically, recently, a trio of scientists led by mathematical genius physicist Roger Penrose, which was the 2020 Physics Nobel Prize winner, in a paper presenting new evidence that universe is just one stage in a potentially infinite cycle of cosmic extinction and rebirth. Sir Roger Penrose, longtime Hawking scientific partner, had a change of mind last year that the universe did not start with this singularity from nothing and one Big Bang. Rather, universe is infinitely cyclical and always existing. If you look at these optical illusions that we have down here to show you basically how this cyclical methodology would work, which is very interesting how our subjective mind can be fooled with just a picture. Great. Now is open for question. I apologize, I ran over some time. We have some time for questions. If anyone is interested to dig further into it, I'd be glad to respond. John?
Yes, so we do have one question from Regina Colston. And Regina, if you don't mind, actually, in this case, asking your question yourself, it'd be very appreciated.
I'll be glad to. That was a fascinating presentation. I love it. You went through your slide to be a little quick. I was taking notes. Would you please explain the concept of to be again?
It's creator means that someone created, it's the will. It's called primal will. In Christian term, Holy Spirit. In Baha'i doctrine, primal will. It's to be means that to create.
Okay, and I want to ask you one other question. I promise I will not dominate, but no. I read something. I live in a town where there's a lot of science that goes on. Sure. And they said at one time they thought there were 4 dimensions. Then they believed there are 12 dimensions. Then they believe there may be hundreds of dimensions. If that may be true, could that explain what Baha'u'llah speaks to about the many worlds of God and the progressions of the soul from one world to the next?
Well, there are some, as you see, our brains are subjective. When we're talking about, for example, proof of creator, we're using mathematical model to prove it exists. Now, half of actually cosmologists, including Penrose, believe that there are multiverse, not universe. And the reason we cannot see those dark matter and dark energy is because those universes those dimensions are interacting with our dimension. So there are multiple universes, and the gravity and attraction and repulsion of those universes is causing us not to see the elements of dark energy and dark matter. So this idea that you discuss is a hypothesis by almost half of the cosmologists in the world today, of course. Roger Penrose is one of them. That there are multi-dimensions generally. When you're looking at the unified force theory, that's something different, that insinuate there is only one force, as there is one creator, and they were trying to find that formula. To prove that, they had to basically create 6 to 11 dimensions, that these strings or quantum of energy oscillate in different form to create one force instead of 4, which is gravity, electromagnetism, weak nuclear force, and strong nuclear force. So that's a separate quantity phenomenon than the spiritual dimensions that Baha'u'llah speak about, but there is correlation to the multiverse that the cosmologists now, half of them, believe.
So, Mr. Hakim, there is a question as to Penrose's change of mind. Is it known what caused Penrose to change his mind from what he believed with Dr. Hawking's to his current view?
Yes, actually, there is a radio telescope output that maps every sound that existed from the beginning of the time. And this was when they created this basically sound telescope that gathered all the noise that exists in the entire universe.
Are we talking about the telescope in Arecibo, Puerto Rico? That one?
No, this was invented a long time ago. They were listening to they mapped basically the entire universe. And the picture of it, you can Google it, you can see. So it's called radio telescope. It may be that one, I'm not 100% sure. But what happens is that now they're seeing basically sound or quantum of energy that they cannot account for. They seeing it, they cannot account for in this, was created by this universe. It's a dilemma. Where did it come from? That's why they decided that there must be some, of course, it's not proven, these are theories.
All right, thank you for that. There is a question, a person has raised his hand, Alex Boyson. If you wouldn't mind asking your question, Alex, now.
Gladly. Thank you so much for this stimulating presentation, and both spiritual and material dimensions. Can you hear me well?
Yes, of course. Please go ahead.
My question is simply very personal. It's what made people think in terms of beginning and end in the first place. And I don't know if this is relevant here. That's why I'm saying it's personal, but certainly.
You mean beginning of universe?
In everything.
No, of course. You see, that's goes back, if you look at philosophically, reverts to primal cause. Primal cause was basically the creator wanted to be known. That was the primal cause. That's why creation occurred. Not by force, but by free will of the creation. So that was the primal cause. if you read Bob's writings, it's amazing. These writings are almost a couple of 100 years old, and we still trying to discover these processes. So the primal cause, or you call attraction, primal attraction or primal love, is the cause of creation from beginning. But if creator forced creation to recognize him, then there was no free will. So that's how the whole beginning started. But remember, even Roger Penrose came to the same conclusion, that creator without creation and creation without creator is not possible. And the only problem is that our subjective mind cannot grapple with the infinity or pre-existence. We can't comprehend it. So creator and creation always existed, and always will exist. Of course, I'm putting my positivist hat, a mathematician hat on. Was that sufficient?
Hello.
Hello?
Dr.
This is Hussein.
Yes. Oh, great. I could unmute myself. Yes, the question is also actually, but the idea of among humans that there is a beginning and end to things at all, that we don't see.
Yeah, because we're mortal. That's why we cannot comprehend.
I see. So, but where mortality, is that a cause of seeing beginning and end?
Of course.
I
Of
agree
course.
with everything you said, by the way. Thank you.
Sure. By the way,
Yes.
when you're looking at the thermodynamics, there is no death in universe. We just invented this because we die, we disappear, but we never get destroyed. Thermodynamics tells you that you may compose or decompose, but you never disappear.
Exactly. So, but where did the idea of beginning and end come from? I mean, this is very asking the same question again and again. Actually, it's a regress. But
Let me.
It's a human invention. Time,
Yeah.
for example, is a human invention.
Right. And where? Yes. Why? Why did we? Why was it invented? And
You see, this is the contrast. You see, because human brain cannot deal with the infinite. We're not designed to do that. So what ends up happening, we extrapolate our limits to infinity. We're mortal, so there must be an immortal exist, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Hello,
That's
Gilbert.
Yes,
You hear me?
of course.
Gilbert, your presentation remind me many years ago, Bill Hatcher came to New York, and we organized a session between him and Isaac Asimov. I'm sure you have heard his name.
Yes,
the famous
of course.
science fiction writer. And the subject of their presentation in a major conference in Pace University was exactly what you were talking this morning. And of course, in the conference, I only understood 50% of what he was talking about. No, the same thing is true this morning. So I'm hoping to listen to your presentation again. Maybe I get the better feeling what's all this theory is all about. I'm very impressed with your one, and it does remind me very much of Bill Hatcher presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. One of the Hawkins students actually was in the lecture of Dr. Hatcher, and he told him verbally, that Hawkins really believes that Hatcher's hypothesis is more plausible than his own, but he likes his own.
Oh, that's interesting. He was a great man. And I remember another incident with Bill Hatcher that we were in a conference and we were staying in the hotel late at night. Suddenly he did the same thing with Michael Penn. He came and knocked on my door. I opened the door and he made a remark. He said, Hussein, the only thing that make the faith progress and prove the existence of God is sacrifice. And a few days later, he died. That was unbelievable incident. Yes. So be careful.
Interesting. No, it's interesting. The problem that we're seeing today is that the image of religion that is contradictory to science is adopted en masse with people, and they're not even looking. And imagine that you're at the time of Wright brothers and you're looking at the manual of a propeller engine that they invented, which was working with the pedals and your human energy, and it was flying, looking at that manual and then trying to find out how a jumbo jet 747 works. Obviously, you're not gonna gain much, and that's why other people looking at the prior manifestations, revelation, which was designed for the time that they came in, and obviously they can pick it apart because it was designed for a certain interval of time in the human history. It wasn't designed for today, but people are using that to justify their action. Ironically, majority of the ethics, quote unquote, that is used by the Western culture came from Baha'i religion, including United Nations of the individual rights, which was Baha'i inspired with the first NGO in United Nations. Dr. Adi, you may want to expand on that. I think Margaret was the person that was part of that team in United Nations. I think it was 1948.
1940s. It was in San Francisco.
San Francisco, okay.
Yes. Yes.
So the document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is an international document adopted by the United Nations General Assembly that enshrines the rights and freedoms of all human beings. It was accepted by the General Assembly as Resolution 217 at its third session on the 10th of December, 1948 at the Palais des Chalots. I can't speak French, sorry everybody, in Paris, France. So in Paris, France, in 1948, this document was accepted by the signatory nations, of which most of the world, their nations have accepted.
Excellent.
Basically, individual right to freedom of speech, freedom of belief, all these things that you see, they're using it, they're under this impression that they invented it, where actually came from Baha'i religion in mid-1800s. And they're slowly seeping. And ironically, people believe if they put it in law, it would get executed, which is not the case. The only way you can bring the ethics into the society and relieve society from the pain that there is in is belief in the Creator. No other method you can make or legislate ethics. And you can see it today in news media, in politics, in education, in you name it. The ethics really, although they're on the books, but nobody is really complying with it.
I have a question. You mentioned, Gilbert, that time is something that is invented by humanity. We created the beginning and supposedly we have an end. Do you believe in the Big Bang theory? I mean, that there was actually one beginning, one Big Bang that created everything?
No, we believe in many Big Bangs, not one. Yes, of course.
An infinite series of Big Bangs.
There was, in fact, when you extrapolate to that one beginning, the scientists are saying that, per se, that there was one Big Bang that created a universe.
No, this universe you're talking about. As Roger Penrose said, they're multiverse, they're not universe. You see, Hawkins were saying that there was one singularity. Now, Roger Penrose actually proved there's singularity in every black hole today. So they expanded that process. Again, these discoveries, because we cannot, the same way we cannot define essence of God, we cannot define essence of the, for example, black matter or black energy. It's synonymous.
I guess in the multi-universe, you can explain that, yes.
So it's cyclical. What's at least today's science or theorem regarding the basically universe is that it's cyclical, and it's been many singularity and many big bangs, and this radio telescope was very intriguing, and that caused a lot of, almost half of the cosmologists to basically move toward multiverse instead of universe.
So there is, from the Baha'i writings, the teaching from, sourcing from Some Answered Questions of Abdu'l-Baha. It says, if the beings were absolutely non-existent, existence would not have come into being. Sorry, let me start from here. If we could imagine a time when no beings existed, this imagination would be the denial of the divinity of God. Moreover, absolute non-existence cannot become existence. If the beings were absolutely non-existent, existence would not have come into being. Therefore, as the essence of unity, that is, the existence of God, is everlasting and eternal, that is to say, it has neither beginning nor end, it is certain that this world of existence, this endless universe, has neither beginning nor end. Yes, it may be that one of the parts of the universe, one of the globes, for example, may come into existence or may be disintegrated, but the other endless globes are still existing. The universe would not be disordered nor destroyed. On the contrary, existence is eternal and perpetual. As each globe has a beginning, necessarily it has an end, because every composition, collective or particular, must of necessity be decomposed. The only difference is that some are quickly decomposed and others more slowly. But it is impossible that a composed thing should not eventually be decomposed. It is
people that said those that you read didn't have the accelerator in CERN.
Yeah, and this is 100 years ago, Abdu'l-Baha was saying this. So there is a question.
That's what this discussion is about, a scientific teaching. That's what we're discussing. Of course, every one of us knows the Abdu'l-Baha's teaching.
Well, I mean, it's a scientific reality. It's a law of science. It's it's the second law, I believe. Well, I'll just tell you the law of conservation of energy. Law of conservation of energy states that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It is transformed. This is an immutable law of science. This is one of the basis of mathematics, which is why you have the equal sign when you do the balancing of an equation. You cannot destroy or create energy. You can only transform it, to transfer it from one place to another. So this is the basis scientifically for that teaching.
It's very hard to put a value on what is spirit. Is that energy? Is that mass? What is that thing? That's the one that basically.
Okay, so now you're talking about something different.
Well, I mean, Abdu'l-Baha teaches us, of course, through the teaching of Baha'u'llah, that.
No, what Abdu'l-Baha mentions, I can maybe clarify this, that your spirit is not material and is not attacked, it's not in you. The spirit is in another dimension. That's why you cannot detect it, but it's adjacent to you. And when your body in this dimension disappears, your spirit becomes free in the other dimension, which is called spiritual dimension. And now let's assume that that was material. If it was material, we would have detected it. So if, and the same way that you can look at a two-dimensional plane. Let's assume there are people on two-dimensional walking. Now you're looking at them from 3 dimension. There is no way, they don't have any tool in this 2 dimension to detect you, right? Now let's do this. Let's pick one of them, one of these people on the 2-dimensional plane, like surface of your table, pull him out and bring him out to 3 dimension and talk to him, right? And then put him back. Now he start to talk about stuff that he's seen in 3 dimension, that he would tell his friends that, you know, I could see all of you moving around, but you couldn't see each other, but I could see you. And they would tell him, you're crazy. Why? Because he was in a different dimension. So your spirit that you're talking about is a different dimension. That's the reason.
So after Armin, Yvette has a question.
Sure.
Hi, I just wanted to ask if you could expand on this concept that science is ever evolving and that scientific principles, when revealed, aren't revealed and then disprove a previous version of itself, so to speak. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Again, this is a misconception that science proved that at one time we thought Earth is the center of universe. Now it's refuted. That's not the case. That was the common belief at the time. It wasn't science. Common belief has nothing to do with science. And the objective boundary between objectification and elements that are not objectifiable is moving. But this doesn't mean we shouldn't go find out what they are. So that limit is not. So when you're saying, when Einstein says the gravity is a curvature of the mass on the space-time, this didn't refute Newton at all. They completed it. That means it applies to more environments. Newton is science, Descartes is science, Galileo is science. Not belief of common man. And it's incremental. For example, you have humans have the same DNA. There is no this race or that race. And of course, we're in genetics environment ourselves. We suffer for it. We know that it's exact replicate, and we're all Africans. It's scientifically proven. You cannot disprove it tomorrow. So people that were saying that they're this race or that race, they didn't say it scientifically. They was telling their opinion because of what they could sense from their visual, basically, elements of their subjective brain. But we are all have same exact gene. So there is only one human race. There is no multiple races. That's false.
But I think it's appropriate that we describe science by a commonly accepted definition of reproducibility. So anything that is reproducible that you can look at and confirm, and another person can confirm it, that is science. Right. Science isn't mere speculation or conjecture. It is not something that I'm going to tell you now, and then you cannot discover it for yourself. Science is a way to describe a reality as we currently physically see it through our subjective mind. And it is by means of a medium, some way that we can communicate that's common reality that we all share. But in short, science is anything you can reproduce. If you can reproduce it, that means someone else can see it. They can also, again, see it for themselves. There was a question.
Yeah, this question is very simply proves that the word called science has different meaning in different people.
Yes. And again, you have to have a common definition and agree upon it, have a meeting of the minds, which is why a meeting of the minds is so important. And there's a subject from Gilbert Hakim. He has a question on a subject to ask you.
Sure.
Gilbert John, this was a beautiful presentation. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. I would like to ask actually two questions and hear your comments in regards to some peripheral aspects of this issue. Well, I would say as a scientist and a philosopher, I might say, okay, we have proven that God exists. As Baha'is, we can't even approach the concept of God's quiddity. We can't even touch upon that. However, there are two fundamental questions that I think every human being, every philosopher is going to be interested about, and that is, why should be interested in the concept of God anyway? And number two, how does that help us in a practical way in our lives?
Sure. It's very interesting. These are the consequences of creator. And now you have to define what creator is. Is creator a watchmaker? Again, because our subjective mind, we created an image of creator that suits what we want to do. So is the creator—
Could you finish that idea about him, creator being a watchmaker? Could you finish that idea for those watching?
Oh, sorry. The watchmaker means that he created this and he's basically left it alone, and this is on autopilot, and he's looking at us and laughing at us hard up there. That's the watchmaker. Okay, so there are actually, when you go to the primal cause that Bob mentions many in his writings, which creating a creation that could recognize the creator independently. That is the primal cause. So question is that why is this important is if you look at the history of humanity from beginning of time, religion was the only element that created basically jump in civilization. If you look at barbarism of the Christians during the Renaissance era, they themselves talk about dark ages. It's not because sun wasn't coming to Europe. It's because religion of the Christianity was terminated, its time terminated, and those teachings of the Christ was lost and was not adhered to. That is the reason you saw Islamic culture came to its golden age of civilization. So these are the elements that now we're saying there is a God. It doesn't leave its creation alone. It doesn't have a magical hand. There is no invisible hand. So through manifestations, he's sending these instruction sets before the problem actually. So for the following 1,000 years, it sends messages that humanity can, with their free will, accept or reject. If they reject, they bear the consequences. If they accept, then they become basically cohesive and can coexist together. So that's really what the contrast is. Now, a lot of people say, well, we can create laws. that generates that ethics that you say that messenger brought in. And they tell the messengers of God as basically genius people that invented something that basically is true reality, or what's called efficient cause. Efficient cause is a mathematical model that says how to get from point A to point B the most efficient way to use the least amount of energy and least cause of harm. So this formula, you can say these messengers of God were geniuses and they invented it. But if you truly look at the way they transformed humanity is unprecedented. There is no scientist that came up with one or two laws that could transform the whole humanity. Now, you can prove it with lack thereof also. What happened in Cambodia basically during the invasion of communism in Cambodia, where the messenger of God's edicts or ethics was put aside. Half of the population perished. So the population of Khmer Rouge basically decimated people that they disagreed with. Now you see, when the God is not there, what happens? We killed more of our citizens of the world during the 20th century than the entire history of humanity combined. And majority of those were started because they were violating this Holy Spirit in the Christian term, or efficient cause, or basically doctrine of the latest manifestation. It's clear, the correlation is very, very clear. The question is that people use the manual of the Wright brothers airplane to define today's religion. That's the problem, because it doesn't suit them.
Thank you.
Sure. So you cannot legislate ethics. That's the point. Only through education and belief in Creator prevents you from violating somebody else's right. That's the only way. Great. There was some hands raised. You probably can see
it was me, Faride.
Okay.
Gilbert Hakim, Allah, thank you so much. This wonderful talk. It was very deep. Oh my God, you are so knowledgeable. And Irfani and science all was together. Just I remember I want to say that the time I was in Hong Kong, somebody, was very important person was become Baha'i. There is 1 billion Chinese that don't believe in God or religion. And Mr. Aziz Yazdi came. Of course, everybody knows him at Abdu'l-Baha. And I took to Mr. Aziz Yazdi. He said, Mr. Yazdi, I don't like religion. I don't like God. I don't know. And Christianity came to China, killed 1 million people in the name, and took our wealth in the name of the religion and God. But I love Baha'u'llah and Baha'i faith, Baha'i. And Mr. Yazdi has beautiful smile. He said, I am generation Baha'i. I don't know who is God. And I love Baha'u'llah. And you're Baha'i. And that person signed the faith. Now, this situation of the world, Europe, America, I was in Bahrain last year, 1,000 youth. They don't want God and religion. What we can answer? Do you have any answer now for this situation of the world? Thank you.
You see, this Holy Spirit, or the writings of the axioms of the latest manifestations in general. Let's find out, violating one simple in the most advanced society that we claim Americans are, what happens? Obviously, religious people, including Jesus, prohibited alcohol. The Christians took new wine, which was grape juice, and they told people you can drink alcohol. So it's humans that did. Let's see in Mohammedan dispensation and Baha'i dispensation, alcohol is prohibited. Let's see what's the implication of violating this law. An estimated 95,000 people die from alcohol-related causes annually in the United States, making alcohol the third leading preventable cause of death in the United States. The first is tobacco, second is poor diet, and physical activity, of course. Now, what is the consequences on the family? What is 95,000? Is 10 times Vietnam War is occurring every year in the United States. Nobody says anything. 10 times. Family consequence, more than 10% of US children live with parents with alcohol problems, according to 2012 study. Approximately 26.5 of adults in US, 86 million reported engaging in binge drinking in the past 30 days. 21 million confirmed heavy drinker in the past month. So as many as 30% of Americans may have drinking problem. So is this acceptable? Now you see when you put a frog into a pot and slowly warm it, they won't jump out and they stay there until they're cooked. Now we're in that process. Ethically, morally, we're getting cooked because we're violating those laws. Equality of man and woman, ethics, truthfulness. We're violating those in every echelon of our society. Abortion, and so on and so forth. So the key really is when you point to the violations, then they would understand why they should follow God's law.
Thank you so much for bringing these points to the forefront.
Thank you very much.
I'm not sure. We have one person with a hand raised. I'm not sure if it's intended. Yvette, did you get your question answered?
I did, yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So we are about done today. We went over today, but it was a very, very important subject and we needed to have our questions answered. So again, Mr. Hakim, thank you so much for joining us today. It is on clearwaterbahais.org that you can find the source materials used. You can download the PDF, the materials relating to Dr. William Hatcher and his works. You can find that on www.clearwaterbahais.org, or you could go directly to his website. When you look up on Google, Dr. William Hatcher, Proof of the Existence of God, there is his website, which is william.hatcher.org. And of course, his books. He has one book called Minimalism, upon which this presentation was based. And of course, for those of you who are wondering, how do I understand what I'm looking at? There is a class you can take online on logic. It is an actual class called Logic. If you learn how to use the logical formulas to describe logic, you too will be able to reproduce these on your own. But until then, please peruse the works that you have from Dr. William Hatcher. Visit us on www.clearwaterbahais.org for our next topic for next week. Thank you.
I just want to, in the end, I just want to mention some words from Abdu'l-Baha. He mentioned if you take the God out of the civilization, you'll see that we turn into animals nay, worse than animals. And we've seen clearly this sentence in Cambodia and all those basically material types of doctrine by Karl Marx regarding communism. So you see strictly when you take completely God and ethics out, what the outcome would be. Thank you very much and have a nice rest of the weekend that you have. Thank you. Take care, everyone.